Now that Maggie is restored and I've had 2 driving seasons under the belt in 1,800 miles on the rebuild, I've down to just a couple of little minor issues and that you discover when you're driving the car. One of them is that apparently most MGAs have a problem with a leak, a small oil leak that comes out the back of the engine where it connects to the bell housing, and there's actually a hole in the bottom of the bell housing. My bell housing actually has 3 holes, so the oil can drip down and not affect the clutch and drip out of the car. So it means your car isn't very well behaved in your garage after a ride. It doesn't seem to do it when the car is running, but when you get back, you turn it off, warm engine, you get a little very minor but annoying oil leak up the bottom. So these are some solutions that I found on mgaguru.com that there's about at least 5 people that have come up with solutions to catch the oil. It's not a lot of oil, so keep it off your floor and then you can dump it out of this little tray. So this one here and this one here have a design that lets the oil accumulate down into the bottom of the pan easily. And the thing I didn't like about these designs, there's nothing wrong with the design, but it's a little harder to build it because you have to build end caps on the 2 ends to match this complex shape, and then you have to weld around that. So it's a bit more work to build it. This one over here I liked, but I thought this particular rendering was a little flimsy because it uses straps coming off the back. I suspect that it's going to move around a little bit. It was also rendered with aluminum and fairly thin stock. So I came up with a design similar to this for a tray. My tray this is the way it's oriented to go into the car. All of these attach to the bottom 2 bolt holes that connect the engine to the bell housing. So you just take that out, get a little bit longer bolt, and bolt it into the end, and it'll hang down like all of these designs do, like this, and catch the oil. So I felt that this design was going to work for me in being easier to build. And I also felt that it wasn't necessary to have this trough like these 2 at the bottom of the thing to have the oil come down, because as long as I've got high enough sides, I don't think the oil's, you can build up quite a bit of oil before you might have to worry about it splashing out. And when I go to take it out, what I'm going to do to get underneath there anyway is jack up the front of the car. And when I do that, this is going to be at an angle like this. All the oil that's in there will flow down to the drain hole. And so I don't really think it's necessary to have this triangular shape, which I think to me is a little harder to build. So what I did to build this was, here's the pattern I used. Its overall width is 9.5, and its overall height is 8 5/8. And the sides are each 1.5 inches. So you can just cut you can make the 9.5 by 8 5/8 piece of stock. I use 20 gauge steel. And then once you bend these 3, or on your pattern, cut out the corners and bend these 3 up, then the rest is where the bend point is for the other one. The dimension from the end here up to this upper bend point, because that's the one flap that isn't 1.5 inches, that dimension is 5 1/4 to the upper bend point. So 8 5/8 total, 5 1/4 to this bend point. Now the other thing I did differently from the pattern was I didn't do slots. I did centered holes. I could make them slots later if I wanted to, but I started with 2 holes. 2 holes so I can get a height adjustment. And those holes need to be on 5 1/8 inch centers. That will match the location of the hole, the bolts that go from the engine to the bell housing. And the only other thing I did differently was I left these 2 flaps bigger by about maybe 1/2 inch, 3/8, something like that, on this end, and same thing on the other side. And that is so that once you bend these pieces up, you have a tab here that you bend this way, and that's what holds it all together. So you can see here I've got the tabs are bent over and welded here and here, and same thing on the back, they're welded over. And then down at the bottom of it, where it's going to leak down the bottom, I've drilled a 5/16 hole and welded in a 5/16 nut. Now this is kind of a messy weld because having not welded for a year or so, of course I blew a hole next to where the weld nut is, leaving the electrode for the welder, MIG welder, on a little too long. So what I did was I repaired that, and I repaired it by cutting a little washer in here. There was already a washer on this side that kind of welded to the inside. So I put another half washer to cover the hole, clamped it all together, and welded it top and bottom. And that resulted in no more leak. So no more leak, no more hole there, and I shows no light through when I hold it up to a light. So it's just a matter now. I'm going to do some seam sealer in the seams, just to give it a little extra likelihood that there's no chance of oil going out from here, except through the drain hole. And the threads have been clean. You put a 5/16. I think it's, I forget fine thread 5/16 bolt through there with a copper washer and probably a lock washer, and that should, this fits just up, if you look at this, just between the engine back plate and just in front of this cross member. So it fits just up in there nicely. So that's what I'm doing. I'll show you another final picture with it cleaned up, painted, and mounted on the car. And then I'll give you a report later on whether it worked or not. Okay, there's a shot of the box sealed with Permatex metal filler on all the seams, and primed and painted silver paint. Okay, here's the oil pan, the oil catch pan mounted just behind the sump pan and in front of where the engine connects to the bell housing. So it's tucked right in front of this black cross member without touching. Hopefully it's not going to rattle. And we'll see if how much oil it catches. Okay, 24 hours later. I took Maggie yesterday for a 50-minute, 25-mile ride. So she's been parked overnight. And let's go see if we get any oil on the bottom underneath here. Hopefully we can get a good view. Well, there's the oil catcher. Get a flashlight. I see one small little quarter-sized drop right there, which I'm pretty sure is from my speedometer cable, and all the other oil that I used to have, like an oil slime, sitting on the bottom is gone. So I'd say this thing's working.